am sitting at this table, staring at my own daughter's face, watching her mouth form the words that will end me, words I already knew were coming. The birthday cake sits untouched between us, 72 candles unlit, a cruel joke in pink frosting that says happy birthday, Mom in letters too cheerful. My hands rest flat on the white tablecloth, liver spotted and trembling slightly, not from age, but from the rage building inside my chest like a storm. These hands built a life, raised 2 children, buried a husband, and now they're about to do something I've planned for 6 long months with precision. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and at 72 years old, I've learned that your own blood can be the sharpest knife that cuts you deepest. Evie spent 7 decades being the good mother, the patient grandmother, the woman who always understood, always forgave, always gave more than she kept. But today, on my birthday, in this restaurant where she chose to humiliate me, I'm about to become someone entirely different, someone they wish they'd never met. Before I continue my story, I'd like to know who's on the other side listening to me right now, hearing these words that are costing me everything to say. Comment your name and where you're watching from, and check if you're subscribed to the channel. It helps me so much to keep bringing these real stories to you all. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching, how many people understand what it's like to be betrayed. How did I get here, to this moment of calculated destruction? It started 6 months ago, when my daughter Sarah showed up at my door with her husband Marcos. They hadn't visited in 2 years, not since they moved to that fancy neighborhood where houses cost more than most people make in a lifetime, where appearances matter. Sarah hugged me at the door, her perfume expensive and suffocating, and I remember thinking something felt wrong, the way you sense a storm coming before the clouds appear. Marcus smiled his practice smile, the one I'd seen him use on clients and waiters, the smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes behind those designer glasses. They sat in my living room, making small talk about weather and traffic, but their eyes kept darting around, cataloging, assessing, pricing every piece of furniture. Then Sarah touched my hand, that gesture that once would have warmed my heart, and said, "Mom, we've been worried about you, living alone at your age. It's dangerous." Marcus nodded along like a puppet, adding that they'd been discussing my situation as if I were a problem to be solved, rather than a person with agency and intelligence. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, that instinct you develop after 7 decades of reading people, of knowing when someone's lying straight to your face with love. They wanted me to sign papers. Power of attorney, they called it. Just a safety measure in case something happened, in case I couldn't make decisions for myself anymore. The way Sarah said it, all soft and concerned, like she was doing me a favor, protecting me from myself, from the world, from my own supposed declining mental state. But I saw the glance between them, quick as a heartbeat when they thought I went looking, a glance that spoke of conspiracy and greed and something much darker brewing. I told them I'd think about it. I needed time, and I watched Marcus' jaw tighten just slightly, the first crack in his carefully constructed facade of concern and care. That night I couldn't sleep, lying in the bed I'd shared with my late husband, Robert, for 43 years, until cancer took him 5 years ago, leaving me financially comfortable. Something nagged at me, a splinter in my mind, and at 3 in the morning, I got up and went to my study where I kept all my financial documents organized alphabetically. I started going through my bank statements, something I hadn't examined closely in months, trusting that everything was as it should be, as it had always been for decades. That's when I found it, the first thread that would unravel everything. Small withdrawals, $500 here, $800 there, always just under $1,000 each time. They've been happening for 18 months, carefully spaced out, carefully hidden in the normal flow of expenses, designed to go unnoticed by an old woman they thought was losing her grip. My hand shook as I counted, as I calculated, as I realized that nearly $47,000 had vanished from my accounts over the past year and a half without my knowledge. I sat there in my study as dawn broke through the windows, painting everything in that cruel, hopeful light, and something inside me died, and something else was born, something harder. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs, that my own daughter, the baby I'd nursed and raised, had been robbing me blind while smiling to my face. And that's how I ended up here, at this birthday lunch 6 months later, with a plan so carefully constructed that every detail has been checked and rechecked 100 times. I spent those 6 months being the perfect target, the confused old lady, asking the same questions twice, forgetting names, pretending my mind was slipping away like sand through fingers. I let them think they were winning, let them believe their plan was working, while secretly I met with lawyers, with forensic accountants, with people who could help me document every single theft. I hired a private investigator, a sharp woman named Patricia, who looked like somebody's sweet aunt but had the instincts of a shark circling blood in dark water. What she uncovered made those $47,000 look like pocket change, like the tip of an iceberg hiding an ocean of betrayal and criminal conspiracy beneath the surface. Marcus had been planning this for years, since before he even married Sarah, targeting me specifically because Robert had left me well off, comfortable, with assets worth millions. He'd married my daughter, not out of love, but as part of a long con, a calculated move in a chess game where I was the prize, the retirement fund he'd been waiting for. The withdrawals were just the beginning, small amounts to test if I was paying attention, if I was sharp enough to notice, if I was the easy mark he believed I was. He'd forged my signature on documents, opened credit cards in my name, taken out loans against my house, created a web of debt designed to force me into a corner with no escape. His plan was elegant in its cruelty: drive me into apparent mental decline, get power of attorney, declare me incompetent, then systematically drain every account, sell every asset, leave me with nothing, and Sarah, my daughter, my baby girl, who I'd held through nightmares and heartbreaks, who I'd supported through college and her first job, she knew. She was part of it all. Patricia showed me emails, text messages between them, discussing me like I was already dead, planning how they'd divide the spoils, what they'd buy with my life's accumulated wealth and work. In one message, Marcus called me the old bat who won't die fast enough, and Sarah had responded with a laughing emoji. Just 18 more months, she'd written. Then we're set for life. I remember sitting in Patricia's office, reading those messages on her computer screen, and feeling something inside me turn to ice, to stone, to something that could not bend or break. The woman who'd always forgiven, who'd always understood, who'd turned the other cheek for 7 decades, she disappeared completely in that moment of absolute betrayal, dissolved like morning mist. That was 3 months ago, and since then I've been the greatest actress of my life, playing confused and worried, playing into their hands, letting them think victory was just within reach. I changed my will secretly, working with a lawyer in the next county where nobody knew me, where Marcus' connections and influence meant absolutely nothing at all in the eyes of justice. I gathered evidence, statements, documents, recordings, building a case so airtight that no lawyer on earth could argue their way out of what I was about to unleash on them both. And I planned this lunch, this birthday lunch, picking this restaurant specifically because it's where Sarah and Marcus come every Friday night, where they're known, where they have reputation, The waiter brought water and bread, and Sarah smiled at me with that fake warmth, that performance of daughterly love, and said, "Mom, we have something important to discuss with you today." Marcus cleared his throat, that pompous sound he makes before delivering what he thinks is devastating news, before revealing the trap they've spent years carefully constructing around me and my estate. Sarah took my hand across the table, her fingers cold despite the warm restaurant, and said words I'd prepared for, words I'd rehearsed my reaction to 100 times in my mirror. "Mom, Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it's time we faced reality here. You're not getting any younger. Your memory has been slipping badly these past months. It's concerning us. We've consulted with doctors, with specialists," she lied smoothly. "They all agree that you're showing signs of dementia, of cognitive decline. You need someone to help you make decisions now safely." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with false concern, and I let my face crumble just slightly, let confusion flicker in my eyes the way I'd practiced, playing my role perfectly. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he uses with waiters and service workers, people he considers beneath him, including apparently his own wife's elderly mother. "Eleanor, we love you. We want what's best for you. And what is best right now is letting us take care of things, letting us handle your finances, your property, everything that's become too much." He pushed papers across the table, legal documents I'd already had my lawyer examining, documents that would give them complete control over everything I owned, everything I'd worked for, everything I am. "All you have to do is sign," he said, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed greed, "and we'll make sure you're taken care of, that you're comfortable, that you don't have to worry anymore." Sarah squeezed my hand, adding, "We've even looked at some wonderful assisted living facilities, places where you'd be safe, where trained staff could watch over you around the clock completely." The trap was sprung, the moment they've been building toward for years, and they sat there expecting me to crumble, to cry, to sign away my life with a shaken hand and grateful tears. Instead, I reached into my purse, that old leather bag I've carried for 15 years, and pulled out my own envelope, crisp and white, and filled with their complete destruction and ruin. I placed it on the table between us, right next to their fraudulent documents, and watched their faces carefully, seeing the first flicker of uncertainty cross Marcus's calculating features like a shadow. "What's this, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice still sticky sweet, but with an edge now, a nervousness creeping in like water through cracks in a dam, about to burst completely. "This," I said, my voice steady and cold, "is every bank statement showing the $47,000 you've stolen from me over the past 18 months, with dates and amounts highlighted." I pulled out more papers, spreading them across the table like cards in a winning poker hand, and continued while their faces went pale as the white tablecloth beneath their guilty hands. "This is documentation of the credit cards you opened in my name, Marcus, the loans you took out against my house, the forged signatures, all examined and verified by forensic accountants. This is a copy of the emails between you two, the ones where you call me the old bat who won't die fast enough, where you laugh about making me sign away everything I own. This is a restraining order, already filed and approved, preventing either of you from coming within 500 feet of me or my property, or contacting me in any form or fashion. And this," I said, pulling out the final document with the hands that no longer trembled but were steady as steel, "is my new will, leaving everything to charity, every single penny. You get nothing." The silence that fell over our table was absolute, total. The kind of silence that rings in your ears like the absence of sound after an explosion levels everything around you flat. Marcus's face went from pale to red, his jaw working, but no sound coming out. And I saw the exact moment he realized that his years of planning had just collapsed into ruins. Sarah started crying, but they weren't real tears. They were the calculated tears she'd used since childhood to get what she wanted, to manipulate, to control, to win through pity. "Mom, please," she gasped. "We were only trying to help. You don't understand. You're confused. This isn't what you think. We love you. We'd never hurt you, never take from you like this." But I was already standing, already gathering my purse, already done with both of them forever. The ties of blood and history severed as cleanly as scissors through silk ribbon. The other diners were starting to stare, drawn by Sarah's theatrical sobbing and Marcus's face that had gone purple with rage he couldn't quite suppress or hide from watching eyes. I leaned down close to them both, close enough to smell Sarah's expensive perfume and Marcus's cologne, close enough for my words to cut deep where nobody else could hear them. "I know everything," I whispered. "Every lie, every theft, every moment you thought I was too old and stupid to notice what you were doing, every laugh at my expense, every cruel calculation. I've sent copies of all the evidence to the district attorney, to your employer Marcus, to everyone in your social circle, to everyone who thinks you're respectable, successful people, and not common thieves. Your reputation, your jobs, your future, everything you thought you were stealing from me. It's gone now, destroyed, just like you tried to destroy me, just like you planned for my final years." I straightened up, shouldered my purse, and looked at them both one final time, memorizing their shocked faces, their devastation, the moment they realized they'd lost absolutely everything that mattered. "You wanted my money, my house, my life," I said, clearly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "And now you have nothing. Not even a mother who will mourn the daughter who died the day she chose greed." I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, with my dignity intact, with the satisfaction of justice served cold and precisely measured to match their years of calculated cruelty and betrayal. The sun was bright outside, almost offensively cheerful, and I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in air that tasted like freedom, like vindication, like the beginning of something new and unexpected. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Patricia, congratulating me, telling me the district attorney was very interested in the case, that criminal charges were likely, that justice was coming hard. I thought about calling my son Michael, the one who'd moved across the country 10 years ago and rarely called, but who'd never asked me for money, never tried to manipulate or control. We'd grown distant over the years, pulled apart by geography and life and the way families sometimes drift when there's no particular anchor holding them together through storms and calm waters. But maybe now, with this weight lifted, with the truth out, with the parasites removed, maybe there was space for something honest, something real, something that didn't involve hidden agendas and greed. I walked to my car, got in, sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, just breathing, just existing in this strange new reality where I had chosen myself over the illusion of family. The guilt tried to creep in, the voice that said a mother shouldn't do this to her child, shouldn't cut them off, shouldn't destroy them, even when they tried to destroy her first completely. But I pushed it away, recognizing it for what it was, the same conditioning that had let them get away with so much for so long, the belief that mothers must sacrifice everything always. I started the engine and pulled out onto the street, heading home to the house that was still mine, would always be mine, the house where I'd raised those children with love and hope and dreams. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to take everything, they'd gotten nothing, that their greed had been the architect of their own complete and total destruction in the end result. I'd planned one more thing, though, one final act that would happen in 3 weeks, something that would cement their downfall in the eyes of everyone who mattered to their social climbing aspirations. Michael was getting married finally, at age 45, to a wonderful woman named Jennifer he'd met exactly once, but who seemed genuine, who seemed to see through the family's polished surface to the rot. Sarah and Marcus would be there, of course. My daughter wouldn't miss her brother's wedding, wouldn't pass up the chance to perform family unity for the assembled guests and important connections. But they'd sent Michael everything, all the evidence, all the documentation, and he'd called me for the first time in 2 years, his voice shaking with anger and disgust at what Sarah had done. He'd invited me formally, officially, and told me he'd be making an announcement at the reception, something that would ensure Sarah and Marcus understood there was no coming back from their choices here. The wedding was going to be big, over 200 guests, including Marcus's employer, their neighbors, their country club friends, everyone who knew them as the successful, ambitious power couple they pretended. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, sapphire blue that matched my eyes, a dress that said, "I'm here, I'm alive, I'm winning, I'm not the confused old woman you tried to erase from existence." The 3 weeks passed slowly, each day feeling like waiting for a storm you know is coming, watching the sky darken, feeling the pressure change, knowing the lightning will be spectacular and devastating. I spent the time getting my affairs in order, meeting with my lawyer, setting up the charitable foundation that would receive my estate, ensuring my legacy would help people, not spoiled entitled thieves. I also hired a companion, a lovely woman named Rose, who was 68 and had just lost her husband, who needed purpose, and I needed someone genuine around me for company and honest friendship. We became fast friends over tea and crossword puzzles, and she helped me pick out shoes for the wedding, sensible but elegant, shoes that wouldn't betray me if I needed to stand and speak. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach, that nervous energy that comes before something momentous, before you step off a cliff and hope you've built your wings correctly. Rose helped me with my makeup. Nothing dramatic, just enough to look polished and put together, to show I was anything but the declining, confused woman Sarah and Marcus had tried to paint me. We drove to the venue together, a beautiful country club overlooking a lake, the kind of place where everything is tasteful and expensive, and designed to impress people who value such superficial things greatly. I saw Sarah and Marcus arrive, watched from my car as they got out of their BMW, saw how they held themselves rigid, saw the strain in their faces even from a distance across the parking lot. They'd lost Marco's job, Patricia had informed me. The company didn't appreciate having an employee under criminal investigation for fraud and elderly abuse, didn't want the association or bad press publicity. Their house was for sale, forced to cover the legal fees and pay back what they'd stolen. Their perfect life crumbling like a sandcastle when the tide of consequences finally came rushing in mercilessly. I waited until they were inside before I got out, before I walked toward that building with Rose beside me, toward the final chapter of this story, toward the moment of complete and total public reckoning. The ceremony was beautiful. Michael and Jennifer glowing with genuine happiness, the kind of joy that comes from love rather than calculation, from partnership rather than parasitic opportunistic using. I sat in the third row and felt tears prick my eyes, watching my son promise to honor and cherish, knowing that he meant those words, that he'd found something real and true. Sarah sat across the aisle, her face a mask of forced happiness, and when our eyes met, she looked away quickly, unable to hold my gaze, unable to face what she'd become and done. The reception was in a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and tables set with china and silverware that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. all designed for maximum impressive display. I found my assigned seat at Michael's table, the place of honor usually reserved for close family, and saw that Sarah and Marcus had been seated toward the back, a deliberate statement of position. The dinner was served, course after course of expensive food that I barely tasted, my stomach too tight with anticipation, my mind focused on what was coming soon, inevitably, irreversibly, now finally. Then Michael stood, tapped his glass, and the room fell silent, 200 pairs of eyes turning to the groom, expecting the usual thanks and toasts and sentimental words about love. But Michael's face was serious, almost grim, and he looked directly at Sarah and Marcus as he began to speak into the microphone that would carry his words to every corner of the listening room. "I want to take a moment to thank everyone for being here today," he started, "to celebrate love and family and commitment, values that I thought we all shared and held sacred and inviolable always. But I also need to address something that's been brought to my attention recently, something that concerns my mother Eleanor, who many of you know and love and respect deeply and completely." The room was silent, tension building like pressure for an explosion, and I saw Sarah's face go white, saw Marcus reach for her hand under the table, both of them frozen like deer in headlights. 6 months ago, my sister Sarah and her husband Marcos attempted to defraud our mother, to declare her incompetent, to steal her life savings and property through manipulation and forgery, Michael continued with steady voice. They withdrew nearly $50,000 without her knowledge, forged her signature on legal documents, took out loans in her name, and planned to have her declared mentally unfit so they could control everything. The gasps around the room were audible, heads turning toward Sarah and Marcus, whispers starting like fire catching dry kindling, spreading through the assembled guests with shocked horror and fascinated disgust. "My mother," Michael said, his voice growing stronger, "is sharper and more capable than any of us, and she figured out their scheme, gathered evidence, and stopped them before they could destroy her completely." He looked at me then, smiled with genuine love and admiration, and continued while Sarah started to stand, to leave, but Marcus pulled her back down, both of them trapped by social conventions now. "I'm sharing this because I believe in truth, in protecting the vulnerable, and in making sure that elder abuse has consequences that extend beyond just legal ramifications to social accountability as well. Sarah and Marcus are currently under criminal investigation for fraud, forgery, and financial abuse of the elderly, charges that carry serious prison time and will follow them for the rest of their lives forever. They are no longer welcome in my life, in my mother's life, or in this family. And I'm asking all of you here to remember that appearances can deceive, that respectability can hide cruelty and evil." Michael raised his glass, looked at me with eyes that held tears and pride, and said, "To my mother, Eleanor, who taught me that strength isn't about never being vulnerable, but about fighting back when someone tries." The room erupted, some people standing to applaud, others sitting in stunned silence. And I saw Sarah and Marcus stumbling toward the exit, their faces destroyed, their reputation ashes scattered in the wind completely. I stood slowly, walked to where Michael stood, and hugged him while cameras flashed and people whispered, and the truth spread through that room like cleansing fire, burning away years of pretty lies. Later, after the dancing started and the shock subsided, people came to me, strangers and family friends, telling me they'd suspected something. They'd never trusted Marcos. They admired my courage and strength. I realized in those moments of genuine human connection that losing Sarah, losing the illusion of that relationship, had opened space for real connections, for people who saw me as more than a resource. Rose drove me home that night, both of us exhausted but exhilarated, and we sat in my living room drinking tea, and rehashing every moment, every shocked face, every whispered conversation we'd overheard. The next morning, the local paper had a small article about the wedding mentioning the unusual announcement, and my phone started ringing with calls from people I hadn't heard from in years asking. Some were genuine concern and support, others were barely disguised curiosity and gossip-seeking, and I learned quickly to distinguish between the two, to protect my peace and energy carefully from those who drain. Patricia called to tell me the criminal charges were moving forward. The district attorney had enough evidence for a solid case, and Marcus was looking at serious prison time, while Sarah might get probation. Part of me waited to feel guilty, to feel the maternal instinct kick in and make me want to save my daughter from the consequences of her own terrible choices and actions. But that feeling never came, replaced instead by a profound peace, a sense that justice wasn't about revenge, but about accountability, about saying some behaviors have consequences you cannot escape from ultimately. I started volunteering at a senior center, helping other elderly people recognize the signs of financial abuse, sharing my story to help protect others from the same cruel fate it narrowly escaped. The work felt meaningful in a way nothing had in years, using my experience to create something positive, to turn my pain into a shield for others who might be vulnerable and targeted. Rose and I took a trip to Maine, something I'd always wanted to do, spending a week by the ocean in a small cottage, breathing salt air and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in decades. Michael and Jennifer visited regularly, and I got to know my son again as an adult, as a person, not just as the child who disappointed me by moving away and rarely calling back home. He apologized for his absence, for not seeing what Sarah and Marcus were doing, for assuming everything was fine because it was easier than investigating or confronting uncomfortable family truths that lay beneath. I forgave him because his absence had been passive, had been about his own life and choices, not about actively trying to harm me, not about greed or cruelty or calculated betrayal and deception. 6 months after the wedding, I attended Marcus' trial, sitting in the courtroom watching him in an orange jumpsuit, watching the evidence pile up like stones, burying him in his own grave of lies. Sarah wasn't charged as harshly, having cooperated with investigators, having apparently been somewhat manipulated by Marcus herself, though I'm not sure I believe that convenient narrative entirely, or at all, honestly. She wrote me a letter, delivered through her lawyer, full of apologies and excuses and explanations that all sounded hollow, that all felt like just another manipulation, another attempt to get something from me. I didn't respond, didn't engage, because there was nothing left to say, no bridge to rebuild, no relationship to salvage from the ashes of trust burned to nothing but bitter smoke and regret. Marcus got 7 years in prison, a sentence that felt both too long and not long enough, but that represented justice in its imperfect human form, flawed but functioning somewhat as designed and intended. Sarah lost her house, her friends, her social standing, everything she'd valued more than her own mother, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another state, started over somewhere new. Sometimes late at night, I think about her as a child, the little girl who'd crawl into my lap and tell me she loved me more than all the stars, and I mourn that child and that version. But I also know that somewhere along the way, that child made choices, chose greed over love, chose Marcus over me, chose money over the relationship we could have had if she'd only been honest and kind. The grief is real, but so is the peace, the freedom of not waiting for the next betrayal, of not wondering what they're planning, of not having to second-guess every interaction and motive. I celebrated my 73rd birthday quietly with Rose and Michael and Jennifer. No fancy restaurant, just a home-cooked meal and genuine laughter and people who actually cared whether I lived or died naturally. The charitable foundation I'd set up was doing good work, funding programs for elderly people, protecting others from the kind of abuse I'd experienced, turning my money into something meaningful and lasting beyond mere numbers. I updated my will again, leaving everything to the foundation with provisions for Michael and his future children, ensuring my legacy would be protection and care, not ammunition for family warfare and greed. Looking back now, a year after that birthday lunch confrontation, I realized that the woman who walked into that restaurant isn't quite the same woman who walked out of it transformed by fire. I'm harder now, more cautious, less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, less interested in maintaining peace at the cost of my own dignity and safety from those who would harm. But I'm also freer, lighter, unburdened by the weight of maintaining relationships that were always one-sided, always demanding, always taking more than they gave to me in any form or fashion. The money they stole, the $47,000, I never got it back. It was spent long before the investigation started, dissolved into their lifestyle, their appearance, their empty illusion of success. But I realized I didn't need it back, that the real theft wasn't the money, but the years I'd spent believing they loved me, the emotional investment in people who saw me as a resource. Getting that back, getting my clear vision and self-respect and understanding of my worth, that was worth more than any amount of money they could have taken from my accounts over any time frame imaginable. I think about other elderly people out there, isolated and vulnerable, being drained by family members they trust, too ashamed to admit what's happening, too confused to know where to turn for help. That's why I tell my story, why I speak at senior centers, why I've become an advocate for elder abuse awareness, because silence protects abusers, and speaking up protects victims and potential victims alike. Some people say I went too far, that I should have handled it privately, that airing family problems publicly was vindictive, that I destroyed Sarah's life unnecessarily and cruelly beyond reasonable measure. But I asked them what the alternative was. Let her succeed in stealing everything? Enable her behavior by protecting her from consequences? Pretend it never happened and maintain a fake relationship built on lies? The truth is that public exposure was necessary because people like Marcus and Sarah rely on respectability as camouflage, on privacy as a shield, on social conventions that protect abusers more than victims. Taking that away from them, showing the community who they really were beneath the polished surface, that wasn't revenge. That was removing their ability to victimize others in the future under cover of charm. I sleep well at night now, something I couldn't have said before. When I was constantly on edge, constantly wondering, constantly feeling like something was wrong but unable to put my finger on exactly what. My dreams aren't haunted by Sarah's face or Marcus' calculating eyes. Instead, they're filled with ocean waves and Rose's laughter and plans for the foundation and the good we're doing together helping protect others. I've learned that family is a verb, not a noun, that it's something you do, something you build through actions and care and consistency, not something you're automatically entitled to simply through blood. Michael is my family, now because he shows up, because he cares, because he sees me as a person rather than a resource, because he chose to stand with me when it mattered most critically. Rose is my family because we chose each other, because we support each other, because our friendship is built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation or greed or ulterior motives. The foundation staff and volunteers are my family because we're united in purpose, working together to create something meaningful, to protect people who deserve protection and care and advocacy and justice. Sarah could have been family, too, if she'd chosen differently, if she'd valued me more than money, if she'd been capable of seeing me as anything other than an eventual inheritance to drain. But she made her choices, and now she lives with them, and I live with mine, and the distance between us is measured in more than just miles. It's measured in trust destroyed beyond repair. I don't wish her ill. I don't spend my energy hoping she suffers, because that would give her power over me still, would make my peace dependent on her misery, which I refuse to allow completely. Instead, I wish her nothing, feel nothing when I think of her, which is perhaps the truest sign that I've moved on, that she no longer has any hold on my heart or mind or future at all. Sometimes people ask if I would have done anything differently, if I regret the way I handled it, if the public humiliation was necessary, or if I should have been more merciful and forgiving to them. My answer is always the same. I regret that it happened at all. I regret that my daughter became someone capable of such cruelty. But I don't regret fighting back, protecting myself, demanding justice. Being merciful to people who are actively trying to destroy you isn't mercy. It's self-destruction. It's enabling, it's confusing compassion with being a doormat that invites others to walk all over you repeatedly. Real compassion includes boundaries, includes consequences, includes saying this behavior is unacceptable and I will protect myself even if it means losing you from my life permanently and completely without looking back. I've also learned that age doesn't make you weak or vulnerable unless you believe it does, that the wisdom and experience of 7 decades is a strength, not a weakness, despite what society suggests. My age gave me patience to plan carefully, perspective to see the long game, understanding of human nature that let me predict their moves, knowledge of when to ask for help from professionals and experts. Young people often act on impulse, on emotion, but I had the benefit of decades teaching me that revenge is a dish best served cold, calculated, and with every detail meticulously planned and executed perfectly. The private investigator, the forensic accountant, the lawyer specializing in elder law, these were resources I knew to use because of my years navigating complex systems and understanding how institutions work together. I didn't need to be physically strong to fight back. I needed to be mentally sharp and strategically sound and willing to use every resource available to me, which is exactly what I did methodically. There's power in being underestimated, in letting people think you're confused and declining while you're actually 3 steps ahead, gathering evidence, building your case, preparing for the moment of revelation that changes everything. Marcus and Sarah thought my age made me an easy target, but it actually made me a harder one because I lived long enough to recognize patterns, to trust my instincts, to know when something is wrong. I want other elderly people to know this, to understand that being targeted doesn't mean you're weak. Fighting back doesn't make you vindictive. Protecting yourself isn't selfish even when family is involved in hurting you. You have the right to your own money, your own property, your own decisions, your own life, regardless of how old you are, how confused people claim you are, how much family thinks they're owed. Nobody is owed your life savings because they exist, because they're related to you, because they think they deserve it more than you do, because they're impatient for you to die so they can inherit finally. Your resources are yours to use, to enjoy, to spend, to give away to causes you believe in, to do with exactly as you please without guilt or shame or pressure from greedy, manipulative relatives who only see dollar signs. And if they're stealing from you, report it. Get help. Contact Adult Protective Services. Hire a lawyer. Call the police. Don't protect them from consequences they've earned through their own choices. The shame belongs to them, not to you. The guilt belongs to them for betraying your trust, not to you for refusing to be their victim any longer and standing up for yourself. I've met so many elderly people through my advocacy work who knew they were being exploited, but felt too embarrassed to admit it, too afraid of being alone, too guilty to take action. They tell me stories that break my heart. Adult children who moved back home and took over finances. Grandchildren who borrowed money repeatedly and never paid back. Relatives who promised care but delivered neglect. I listen and I tell them my story, and I watch something shift in their eyes. A recognition that they're not alone, that fighting back is possible, that they deserve better treatment and respect. One woman, Martha, 80 years old, came to me after a talk I gave, told me her son had stolen over $100,000, and she'd been too ashamed to tell anyone the painful truth. We sat together and I helped her make the calls, contact the authorities, start the process of holding him accountable, and she cried, but she also smiled, relieved to finally take action after years. 6 months later, she called to thank me, told me her son was facing charges. She'd gotten a restraining order. She felt safe for the first time in years, like herself again, finally and completely free. These stories fuel me, remind me why speaking up mattered, why public exposure was necessary, why breaking the silence around elder abuse is crucial to protecting vulnerable people from predators who hide in plain sight. The foundation has helped dozens of people now, connecting them with legal resources, providing financial counseling, offering support groups where they can share experiences without judgment or shame from others who understand completely. We've also started an education program, going to community centers and churches and anywhere elderly people gather, teaching them the warning signs of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation to watch for carefully. Things like family members suddenly showing unusual interest in finances after years of distance, pressure to sign documents quickly without time to review, isolation from friends or other family members who might question, changes to accounts or property titles that the elderly person doesn't remember authorizing, missing money or unexplained withdrawals, forged signatures, new powers of attorney appearing suddenly without clear explanation or discussion. Adult children who discourage their parents from seeing lawyers or accountants independently, who insist on being present for all appointments, who control access to mail or phone calls or visitors who might notice problems. Knowledge is power, and giving elderly people the information they need to recognize abuse is the first step in preventing it, in creating communities that protect rather than exploit their most vulnerable members and citizens. I've also worked with the legislators to strengthen elder abuse laws, to make penalties harsher, to make reporting easier, to create systems that actually protect people rather than burying them in bureaucracy and red tape. It's slow work, frustrating work, because systems resist change and people don't like to believe that families can be predatory, that love can curdle into greed, that children can destroy their parents for money. But every small victory matters, every law that passes, every case that is prosecuted, every person who helped, every family that is held accountable for the cruelty and exploitation of those who should be cherished most. I think about Robert, sometimes my late husband, wonder what he would think of who I've become, this advocate and activist, this woman who speaks publicly about our daughter's crimes without flinching or apologizing. He was a peaceful man, avoided conflict, believed in family above all else, and part of me thinks he would have wanted me to forgive Sarah, to give her another chance, to maintain the appearance of unity. But another part of me thinks he would understand, would see that protecting myself and others is more important than protecting Sarah from the consequences she earned through years of calculated deception and theft. He loved Sarah, raised her with such hope and pride, but he also loved justice, believed in accountability, taught both our children that actions have consequences, whether pleasant or painful, fair or harsh but necessary. I like to think he'd be proud of me, of the foundation, of the work we're doing, of the stand I took against abuse, even when it meant losing a daughter. It carried in my body for 9 months. The truth is he'll never know. Death took that conversation from us along with so many others, and I can only do what feels right now, in this moment, with the wisdom and strength I have left. My 74th birthday is coming up soon, and I'm planning a party, a real celebration with Rose and Michael and Jennifer and the foundation volunteers and everyone who's become my chosen family through shared purpose and values. No fancy restaurant this time, just my house and my garden and people who genuinely care whether I'm happy, who see me as Eleanor, not as a bank account or an inheritance or a problem to solve or eliminate. I'm thinking about what I want to say when they sing happy birthday, what message I want to share with these people who've enriched my life in ways I never expected after such devastating loss and betrayal. Maybe something about resilience, about choosing yourself when others won't, about building new families when blood relatives prove toxic, about finding purpose in pain and meaning in survival, and strength in community when isolated and targeted. Or maybe you'll just blow out the candles and eat cake and laugh with people who love me, which is perhaps the best revenge of all. Living well, living fully, living joyfully, despite everything they tried to take. The criminal restitution process is ongoing, complicated by the fact that Marcus spent most of the money and has no assets left to seize. But I'm not holding my breath or basing my peace on seeing that money again. What I got back was worth the more. My sense of self, my agency, my understanding that I'm not powerless just because I'm elderly, my voice and my story and my ability to help others avoid the same fate. I sleep in my own house, in my own bed, surrounded by my own things that nobody is plotting to steal. And that simple security is a gift I don't take for granted anymore after months of paranoia and fear. The recordings I made of that birthday lunch, the ones where Sarah and Marcus said such cruel things, I've only listened to them once since the trial, and I don't think I'll listen again ever in my lifetime. I don't need to torture myself with their words, don't need to keep reopening that wound, don't need the reminder of how they saw me, because I know now, and I've processed it and moved forward. Those recordings served their purpose, provided evidence, contributed to justice being served, and now they sit in a lawyer's file somewhere, archived proof of a betrayal that's already been judged and sentenced appropriately and completely. I prefer to fill my mind with better things now, with the sound of Rose's laugh, with Michael's voice on the phone telling me about his life, with Jennifer's kindness, with the gratitude of people we've helped. The foundation is expanding. We're partnering with other organizations, creating networks of support and protection, building something that will outlast me, that will continue helping people long after I'm gone from this earth. That legacy feels right, feels like redemption for the money Sarah and Marcus stole, turning their theft into something good, into protection for others, into a shield against predators who target the vulnerable and isolated. Sometimes I imagine Sarah seeing news of the foundation, reading about the work we're doing, understanding that her actions ultimately created something positive despite her intentions being entirely selfish and destructive and cruel. I wonder if she feels any remorse, any genuine regret beyond getting caught, any real understanding of what she destroyed. But mostly I don't wonder because it doesn't matter to my peace or forward progress anymore. Her internal state, her feelings, her journey, those are hers to navigate, and I've released any responsibility for her emotional well-being or growth or transformation or lack thereof into the universe to handle without me. My responsibility now is to myself, to my chosen family, to the people we're helping through the foundation, to living whatever years I have left with integrity and purpose and joy whenever possible, despite hardships. I've started writing a book about my experience, working with a ghostwriter who's helping me organize my thoughts and memories into something coherent and useful for others facing similar situations of family exploitation and betrayal. It's painful revisiting everything in detail, going through the timeline, remembering how naive I was, how long I ignored warning signs, how much I wanted to believe Sarah still loved me despite the mounting evidence. But it's also cathartic, transforming private pain into public testimony, turning my story into a resource, creating something that might save even one person from the devastation of familial financial abuse and manipulation. The book will include practical advice, red flags to watch for, resources to contact, legal information, emotional support, strategies, everything I wish I'd known before Sarah and Marcus targeted me so deliberately and systematically. It'll also include stories from others, people I've met through the foundation, a chorus of voices saying, "This happens, you're not alone, it's not your fault, you can survive this, you can fight back and win." Rose is helping me with the project, reading drafts, offering suggestions, sharing her own experiences with grief and loss, and rebuilding life after devastation, adding her perspective to mine in ways that enrich the narrative exponentially and meaningfully. We make a good team, two women in our 70s who refuse to fade quietly into irrelevance, who insist on being heard, who transform our pain into purpose and our survival into advocacy for others. I think about the Eleanor who walked into that birthday lunch 2 years ago, the woman who was nervous and afraid but determined and who'd spent 6 months preparing for one crucial moment of confrontation and exposure. She seems both very close and impossibly distant, like a younger self I barely recognize, someone who still carried hope that maybe she was wrong, maybe Sarah still loved her, maybe it was all a misunderstanding somehow. I'm grateful to her, to that woman who found the courage to investigate, to plan, to execute, to stand up for herself when everything in her conditioning screamed to be quiet, be grateful, accept whatever crumbs family offered. Without her bravery, I might still be trapped, might have signed those papers, might have lost everything, might have ended up in some facility while Sarah and Marcus spent my money and laughed about my stupidity. Instead, I'm here, free, active, purposeful, surrounded by genuine love and respect, using my experience to protect others, living a life that has meaning beyond just existing from day to day, waiting to die alone. The scars are real. The damage to my ability to trust is significant. The loss of my daughter still aches in quiet moments when I'm alone. But the alternative would have been so much worse than temporary pain. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, that boundaries aren't cruel, that sometimes love means letting go of people who refuse to treat you with basic decency and respect you deserve as a human being. I've learned that family isn't automatic or guaranteed, that the people who share your blood can be your greatest enemies, that loyalty is earned through actions, not claimed through biology or guilt or obligation or manipulation. I've learned that being elderly doesn't mean being powerless, that wisdom accumulated over decades is a weapon against those who underestimate us. That age brings clarity about what really matters in life ultimately. And I've learned that speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it destroys relationships, even when people judge you for airing family problems publicly, speaking up saves lives and protects people and matters more than appearances. If I'd stayed silent, if I'd handled it privately, if I'd forgiven and moved on without consequences, Sarah and Marcus would have continued their pattern, would have found other victims, would have faced no real deterrent. But now, Marcus sits in prison, his reputation destroyed, his future limited, his freedom taken, a consequence that matches the severity of his crimes and serves as warning to others considering similar exploitation schemes. And Sarah lives with social exile, with the knowledge that her community knows what she did, with doors closed to her that will never open again, with the loss of relationships and opportunities and standing. These again punishments are inflicted capriciously or vindictively. They're natural consequences of choices made freely, of actions taken deliberately, of betrayals committed with full knowledge and awareness of their destructive impact on their intended victim. I simply refuse to protect them from those consequences, refuse to minimize or excuse or enable, refuse to prioritize their comfort over justice, over truth, over the protection of others, including myself and my hard-earned assets. That refusal, that boundary, that stand, it changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone in my circle, showing that accountability is possible, that elderly people can and should fight back when targeted. The ripple effects continue. People who heard about my case have come forward with their own stories. Prosecutors have pursued cases they might have dismissed before. Families have started harder conversations about respect and boundaries. One case in particular touched me deeply. An 80-year-old man whose granddaughter had been forging checks, who came to me after hearing me speak, who said my story gave him permission to stop protecting her. He pressed charges. She was prosecuted. He recovered some of his money, but more importantly, he recovered his dignity, his sense that his life and savings mattered, that he deserved better than being stolen from by someone he loved. He thanked me with tears in his eyes, said he'd felt so alone, so ashamed, so convinced that family loyalty meant accepting abuse, and hearing my story freed him from that prison of guilt and misplaced obligation. These moments, these connections, these transformations, they're why I keep telling my story, despite the pain of revisiting it, despite the judgment from people who think I should have been more forgiving and merciful to family. Because somewhere out there is another Eleanor, another elderly person being targeted right now, being manipulated, being stolen from, feeling alone and confused and ashamed, needing to hear that fighting back is possible and necessary. If my story reaches even one of those people, if it helps even one person protect themselves or report abuse or refuse to be a victim, then everything I went through, all the pain and loss, it means something beyond personal survival. That's the gift in the devastation, the meaning in the suffering, the purpose that emerges from pain when you refuse to let it destroy you and instead transform it into something that helps others navigate similar darkness successfully. I won't lie and say I'm grateful for what Sarai and Marcos did, that it made me stronger or better, or that I wouldn't change it if I could magically undo the betrayal and theft completely. But I am grateful for who I became through surviving it, for the clarity it brought about what matters, for the relationships I built afterward, for the work that emerged from the ashes of my illusions about family. I'm grateful for Rose's friendship, for Michael's return to my life, for the foundation and everyone involved for the second act of my life that I never expected, but that's richer and more meaningful than I imagined. I'm grateful for the strength I discovered in myself, the strategic thinking, the patience, the ability to plan and execute justice, even when my heart was breaking, the courage to stand alone, if necessary, for what is right. And I'm grateful for every person who shared their story with me, who's trusted me with their pain, who's let me help them find resources and support and justice, who's reminded me that we're not alone in this fight. The work continues, the foundation grows, the book progresses, the advocacy expands, and I keep waking up each morning with purpose, with things to do, with people counting on me, with a life that matters beyond myself. My 74 years have been full, some wonderful, some terrible, but all of them mine, all of them part of the journey that led me here to this moment, to this version of myself I'm proud to be. Despite everything, I look at photographs of Sarah as a child sometimes, not to torture myself, but to remember that the innocent girl existed, that the relationship had good moments before it curdled, that my grief for what's lost is valid. But I don't wish her back into my life, don't want reconciliation, don't believe that time will heal what she broke because some fractures are too fundamental, too complete, too deliberate to ever mend properly. She chose greed over love, money over relationship, Marcus over me, and those choices have permanent consequences, permanent separation, permanent loss that neither time nor apologies can bridge or reverse ever again. I've made peace with that, with the finality of it, with the understanding that some doors once closed can never and should never be reopened, that some losses are permanent and that's okay ultimately. The family I have now, the chosen one, the built one, the earned one, it's smaller but stronger, based on mutual respect rather than obligation, on genuine care rather than biological accident or duty. And that's enough, more than enough. It's everything I need to live well in whatever time I have left, to make the most of these final chapters, to ensure my ending is triumphant rather than tragic. So to anyone listening to my story, to anyone facing similar betrayal or exploitation or abuse from family members who should protect but instead harm, I want you to know several critical things very clearly. First, you are not alone. This happens more often than people admit. Elder abuse is shockingly common and devastatingly underreported because of shame and guilt and misplaced family loyalty that protects abusers and isolates victims. Second, it is not your fault. You did nothing to deserve this. Being trusting doesn't make you stupid. Loving your family doesn't make you weak. You are the victim, not the problem here, no matter what anyone says. Third, you can fight back. You have rights, you have resources, you have legal protections. There are people and organizations that will help you. You don't have to face this alone or accept it as inevitable fate. Fourth, protecting yourself is not selfish. Reporting abuse is not betrayal. Holding family accountable is not cruel. You deserve safety and security and respect regardless of your age or relationship to the person harming you consistently. And fifth, speaking up matters. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Breaking silence protects not just you, but others. Every case reported and prosecuted makes the next one easier, creates precedent, builds awareness, shifts culture slowly. You might lose relationships by standing up, by reporting, by pursuing justice, but ask yourself what you're actually losing. People who see you as a resource, who exploit your love, who harm you deliberately and calculatingly. Those aren't relationships worth keeping at the cost of your dignity, your safety, your financial security, your peace of mind, your remaining years of life that should be comfortable and respected and valued appropriately. Real family, real love, real relationships, they don't require you to accept abuse. They don't demand you stay silent about harm. They don't punish you for protecting yourself from exploitation and manipulation and theft. If standing up for yourself destroys a relationship, that relationship was already destroyed, already toxic, already harmful. You're just finally acknowledging the truth and refusing to pretend anymore for anyone's comfort but your own. I won't pretend the path is easy, that justice is guaranteed, that fighting back doesn't hurt, that you won't grieve what you're losing even when you know it's necessary for survival and future well-being completely. But I promise you that the pain of standing up for yourself, while it's intense, is temporary and meaningful, while the pain of staying silent, of accepting abuse, that pain is chronic, soul-destroying, and meaningless suffering. Choose yourself, protect yourself, fight for yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will, and you deserve to spend your final years in peace and dignity, not in fear and exploitation and betrayal by those who should cherish you. That's my story. That's my message. That's my plea to anyone who needs to hear it. You are worth fighting for. Your life matters. Your well-being matters. And you have every right to protect what's yours from anyone, including family. So I ask you now, after hearing everything I've been through, everything I've survived and transformed, have you experienced something similar with family members who exploited your trust and resources for personal gain? Do you think I went too far in publicly exposing Sarah and Marcos at the wedding? Or was that level of accountability necessary and appropriate given the severity of their calculated exploitation and crimes if you discovered your own family had been plotting against you for years, stealing from you, planning to control your life-present assets? Could you find the strength to fight back, or would the guilt and conditioning silence you? What would you have done differently in my situation? Or do you think I handled it correctly? And most importantly, do you believe elderly people have the right to protect themselves even when it destroys family relationships? Thank you for listening to my story all the way to the end, for sitting with me through this journey of betrayal and justice and transformation into someone stronger than I knew I could become at this age. This is a real story. These things happen to me and continue to happen to thousands of elderly people every day who need support and validation and permission to protect themselves from family predators who exploit vulnerability. If this story touched you somehow, if it made you think or feel or understand something new about elder abuse or family dynamics or the importance of standing up for yourself regardless of age, please subscribe to this channel. I share real stories of survival, of justice, of people who refuse to be victims, who fought back against impossible odds, who transformed their pain into power and purpose, stories that matter and inspire and validate. Tell me in the comments, have you lived through something similar? Has a family member ever betrayed your trust this deeply? What did you do, or what do you wish you'd done differently with more support? I genuinely want to hear your stories too. Want to know I'm not alone in this experience. Want to build a community of people who understand that sometimes love means protecting yourself, even from family, especially from family. Click on the videos appearing on your screen now for more emotional stories of survival and revenge and justice that will make you think differently about family, loyalty, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. Until next time, remember that your life matters at every age, that protecting yourself is never wrong, that speaking up saves lives, and that you're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and worthy of respect. Take care of yourselves out there. Watch for the warning signs in your own lives and in the lives of elderly people you know, and never be afraid to act when something feels wrong because your instincts are trying. This is Eleanor, signing off, grateful to be alive, grateful to be free, grateful to be heard, and grateful to every person who listened to my story and took something meaningful from my pain and my triumph. Remember, family is what you make it, not what biology dictates. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to treat you with the love and respect you inherently deserve.